Okay, well, we'll get started. Thanks again, everyone, for our concluding speaker in our series. Dr. John Saltmarsh directs the New England Resource Center in higher education. He is a professor at UMass Boston in higher education leadership, and has been involved in nearly every national effort and consortium and association around civic engagement for some years now. And a lot of his work in this time of year, as we prepare for the applications of the Carnegie Classification, his center is really the administrative backbone for that work. So we are really pleased to have him here with us and to share with us sort of the big picture on not only this classification, but the critical importance of this work in higher education, where it's going, and where Cleveland State's opportunities are as we move forward in this important work. So with that, Dr. John Saltmarsh.
You should probably wait on the applause. Right? So thanks, Byron, and I just want to tell you too that I've been really excited about the conversations that I've had so far being on campus. It's actually wonderful to see the work that you're doing. But I also want to just say that you've got a terrific leader and resource with Byron White here. I've known Byron for years, and when he asked me to come out here and I saw the list of people who have been here, I was both humbled and impressed. You've had a great set of speakers, all friends and colleagues of mine. But I have to tell you too that when Byron asked me to come, my response was, I'll do anything for you, Byron. And I meant that seriously, because I get asked to do a lot of these things, and even trying to schedule this was not easy. But I feel really strongly, very strongly, about the kind of deep engagement work that Byron is doing and has been doing for years, and would, if he asked me to come anywhere, I would come and do what he asked me to do, because he's a terrific colleague, and you've got a great person here on campus. So in terms of the context of the other conversations that you've had, I think one way to think about it is you've talked with Laura Lee Sandman and Carrie Ann O'Mara around faculty work and the curriculum, and you've talked with Nick Longo about the student work and David Marassi about anchor institutions. I'm going to operate at a slightly different level, which is more maybe kind of the 30,000-foot level around the institution as a whole. And what does this mean for how the institution identifies itself, how it organizes itself, how it practices as an institution community engagement. So that's sort of the way that I'm going to approach this. And I also want this to be, as much as we can, a conversation. So I'm going to talk for a while, and then I'm going to leave it to you to do some talking, and then we can come back. It would help me, too, if we could just really do this quickly, just to kind of know who's in the room. So can we just go around and just do really quick introductions? Can we just start here? From chemistry? Great, thanks.
Dan Walthrop, Civic Commons.
Yep.
Jill Simon, Civic Commons.
Okay. And this table?
Stephen Corey, History and Religious Studies.
Okay.
Lee Wilberscheid, Modern Languages and Teacher Education.
Yep.
Victory Colton Gallagher, College of Business Management Department.
Victoria Wimbush, School of Social and Diversity Management.
Okay. Thanks.
Mohammed Hussein, School of Social Work.
Adrian Goslin, Department of English.
Preston Pickett, Black Studies.
Ruthia Douglas, Community Relations at Cuyahoga.
Thanks for coming.
I'm Charlie Pratt, Cleveland Transfer Connection.
Okay.
Megan Robertson, Cleveland Transfer Connection.
We're doing quick introductions.
Oh, George Segaris, social work.
Ashley Chapin, Dr. White's GA.
Minnie Jones, Urban Studies.
Norm Blatt, Civil and Environmental Engineering.
Jessica Columbia.
Right. Okay. All right. Thank you. All right. So I want to start with a question, and then we'll come back to this question, and I want you to think about it and talk about it. But what would it take for Cleveland State University to achieve national prominence as an engaged university? What would that mean? And I want to start with the Carnegie Classification. As Byron told you, the center that I direct is involved with this classification in the sense that we serve as the administrative partner for the Carnegie Foundation in implementing the classification. And the classification is defined in very specific ways. If you look at the first paragraph here, the emphasis is really on engagement as a process of collaboration and reciprocity. In other words, it's a two-way interchange between the academy and those outside the academy. It's a process, right, which in that process is this deep notion of collaboration and reciprocity. Right? And then the second part is around purpose. Right? So why do we do this collaboration and reciprocity? Why even do this kind of engagement work? And it comes back to the mission of our institutions, the purposes of higher education in preparing citizens for a democracy. Right? So there's a core reason for why we do this work. Right? And the Carnegie Classification is an attempt to try to provide campuses with a way to claim this kind of community engagement work with this kind of purpose as part of who they are as an institution. Okay. Just some quick background. The classification was started by the Carnegie Foundation in 2005. It was piloted, and then the first classification was 2006, and then there was one in 2008 and 2010. And now it's in the same 5-year cycle as the basic classification. The basic classification we all have on our campuses. It's put together out of data which we submit for other purposes. Carnegie then uses that data to classify us. So we can be classified as a community college, right? There are actually 6 different classifications for community college, depending on size, and rural, urban, right? So there's all sorts of, it's not like one classification. Liberal arts colleges, master's granting institutions, doctoral granting institutions, research institutions, right? So that we all have these classifications of who we are. Cleveland State University tends to be, it is in a basic classification, it's referred to as a research high university. Right? There are 3 research classifications, so it's in the middle of that classification. Classifications, not because the Carnegie Foundation wants it that way, but they tend to be used for ranking purposes. Right? So you will probably still hear people talk about, well, you know, we're a Research 1 university. There's actually no such thing as a Research 1 university anymore because Carnegie got rid of that classification 2 cycles ago. But people still talk about it that way because it's kind of prestigious to say we're a Research 1. Right? So it gets used for ranking purposes. That's not what it was ever intended for. It was intended as a way to understand higher education institutions and for research purposes. So campuses have their basic classification, and then if they choose to, they can have a community engagement classification. The purpose of this was to open the possibility for campuses to claim a different kind of identity. So Cleveland State can be very much, and is a research high institution, but it could also be a community engaged institution and claim that through the classification scheme. And when this was designed, it was designed so that it would capture engagement at all different kinds of institutions. And in fact, that's what's happened. There are 311 campuses that have the classification across all institutional types, and engagement looks very different at different kinds of institutions. Another way to think about the classification is this way. This is a piece that Gary Rhodes did, actually just after he became General Secretary of the AAUP. But it's a really good way, I think, to think about what this classification is all about. And if we think about really a century or more of higher education becoming increasingly cosmopolitan, disconnected, disengaged, particularly from local communities, the more objectified and disengaged you could be with sort of the higher status of the institution. And it represents in many ways what Gary talks about as a counterbalancing to a valuing of the local. And it's not that we don't value this cosmopolitan knowledge of the university, but we also value the local. And that includes local knowledge and local ways of knowing. So there's a counterbalancing going on when Carnegie puts out a classification like this, which is really important in the larger scheme. And then fundamentally, it's about our own work and why we do what we do and what's the purpose of our university. So this is your mission statement. So no matter where I went, I could pull up the mission statement, and it would actually say similar kinds of things. Right? It would say certain things about engaging the public and preparing our students to lead productive, responsible, and satisfying lives. It's not unusual. You find that in a lot of different mission statements. Maybe a little unusual here in terms of a focus on the region and globally. There tends to be an emphasis to go globally and not so much go locally. Again, there's this rebalancing to the valuing of the local, and you can see that in your mission statement. Part about who you are as an institution. We'll talk more about that. For students to seek a better life for themselves and their fellow citizens. So there's sort of this civic component to it. Again, not unusual in mission statements. Okay. And then we'll be the strongest public university in the region and be known for our scholarship and diversity in service to our students and our community. So what does this actually mean in practice? What does it mean for the institution to, one way that I think about it is, how do you operationalize this mission? Right? So that it's more than just a document or more than rhetoric. And then part of what's going on with Carnegie is not only about operationalizing the mission of our institutions and claiming that as the identity, but it's also about change in higher education and what's going on in higher education, and not only nationally, but around the world. And it has to do with this question about how campuses claim a certain accountability. And the way that I think about this is accountability around improving the human condition. And it's here where these issues of community engagement and publicly engaged scholarship and community partnerships come right to the center of the conversation, which is exactly where they are now. This is not work that happens on the margins, which is in many ways the way it was seen 20 years ago, but it is core to the academic enterprise. And it's about redefining higher education for the 21st century. Now, you can think about this in a number of ways. You can think about this fundamentally as a way to reclaim the mission of the institution, reclaim the public purposes of higher education, and there are lots of national reports that begin to address this. This is just one that was issued in 2012 from the Association of American Colleges and Universities, A Crucial Moment, focusing on this question of college learning and democracy's promise, fundamentally around questions of civic learning and democratic engagement. Okay. So trying to revive the public purposes of higher education. And that's really important. But then there's this other question about why we do engagement. And here's where I often say, let's just sort of step aside from this whole engagement question. Because we could have come at this in a different way, and we could say, what's happening in our universities around generating knowledge? Because for many in the university, and faculty in particular, that is what they're there for. They're there to generate and disseminate new knowledge. Okay? And much of the work around engagement is fundamentally around this question of generating and disseminating new knowledge. And what does that look like in the 21st century university? So we could look at things like the National Science Foundation, and they have what now are called broader impact statements. So you can't submit a National Science Foundation grant without a broader impact statement. But what are they asking about? They're asking about what are the impacts of the science on the society? Right? How does this knowledge matter? And how will you demonstrate that? And when they talk about broader impacts, what they're really talking about is how does knowledge get generated, or what they talk about systems of knowledge. And how do we need to rethink those systems in much more, in the language here is around interactive ways. Okay? So how do we rethink systems of knowledge generation so that there are interactions between, in this case, scientists in the academy and those outside the academy to be able to actually create useful knowledge, okay? Broader impacts. So this is not so much about engagement, but it's about generating knowledge that makes a difference. Okay? And it happens that engagement is a way to do that.